to be good at cyber, you have to have some understanding fundamentally of the systems, right? We'll just call them the systems. And so you can't be a brain surgeon or an orthopedic surgeon without first becoming a surgeon, right? Going through med school, doing your residency, realizing, oh shit, I want to go do this very specific thing. And so then doing a cardio residency, right? And becoming a surgeon that way. So cyber is the same way. Like if you truly want to understand hacking and fundamentally how things work, like you have to be a protocol expert. You have to understand how does TCP/IP work? And the best way to do that is be a computer scientist, understand how C, C++, Rust, Go, whatever. Learn a language and really learn a language.
Win all in, play my cards right. Up the ante, one blackjack all night. Roll the dice, let it ride. Water the odds, I got snake eyes.
This podcast exists because of the team at CAD/CM. At CAD/CM, we make content creation enjoyable. We are on a mission to help leaders create content that will improve lives, content to be proud of, content that fosters community. We know through firsthand experience how content brings people together, and we love helping make that happen. We produce podcasts, short form videos, blog posts, and other written works, while also providing support in website development, social media management, and strategic planning. And we would be excited to help you. Visit cadcm.com to learn more, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I am fascinated by cybersecurity because I run a business and everything. I'm looking around, I got all these devices, I'm hooked in, all this stuff. And so we could take it from so many different levels. We also have an insurance brokerage company. So now we're dealing with HIPAA, we're dealing with privacy, we're dealing with security, we're dealing with like people who have been in the business for a very long time.
Yeah.
And that means they have very old habits, and that's a problem. And then you work with banks. And it's wild because some of the biggest issues that I've seen pop up are some of the largest companies. And like where social security numbers, as an example, are being sent and getting lost. And then like, it's crazy, right? So that's at a very basic level. So you see it. And I've listened to a couple of your podcasts, and let's just be honest, there's a lot of bullshit out there about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
There's a lot of media coverage about cybersecurity. So if we were to just take it maybe to a fundamental level of like what you're seeing out there, like anyone can be a social media manager expert, anyone can be a fitness expert, anyone I feel like can write an article about like what you need to do and what your password should be for cybersecurity, like very basic level type stuff.
Sure.
Which is good. It's also not good because, man, now we're just getting bad information. So like, where do you see the state of like the whole, as a whole cybersecurity market that we're talking about right now?
In terms of?
Yeah, from a fundamental level, if you think of like an individual, a small business,
Sure.
Just trying to breaking it down. Let's start there.
I mean, there's really three favorite, we call them initial access vectors for bad actors. One is compromising or hacking software that's been unpatched. The second is credential theft, meaning they've purchased somebody's passwords on the dark web for pennies on the dollar or for pennies per credential. And the third is phishing, right? Which is crafting an email that's tailored to you, Eric, as a former Buffalonian who loves chicken wings at Duff's, and you give them your information, or you click and they install some software, or you give them your passwords. These are the three initial access vectors that bad actors use and have been doing so for 30 years because they work. And so there's a lot of, you mentioned bullshit about marketing and cyber and all these kinds of things. Like a lot of the AI craze right now is sensationalized that, AI is going to phish people. It's going to create polymorphic non-C2 required malware, blah, blah, blah. Well, the truth of the matter is that it probably can do that, but it requires prompts from experts. And so really what AI currently is allowing for in the market is for those that are bad actors to be more efficient, or for those that want to be bad actors that don't really have a good understanding to be more sophisticated more quickly. But you still have to prompt the thing. It's not doing it on its own. It's not iRobot shit. Not yet.
Right.
So really the advice for those that to actually spend like no money is keep your software up to date. Don't click on links, especially from people that you don't know about. Even if you think you know it's from somebody, don't click that link. And if you're typing in your password to something, double check that wherever you're typing it is the actual place that you're supposed to go to. And rather than click a link in an email, go to that website directly, type it in, don't follow link redirection from emails. And you'll nullify most risk for compromise.
Yeah. So you hear a lot about obviously 2FA, multi-factor authentication. then there's facial recognition, right? And now you're hearing about, but people can pull a high def photo of yourself. They can use that. Eventually it gets to that place. Like, obviously that's helping, right? And 2FA, you can get with your authenticator app. You can use your cell phone, which I know that they have your phone, then you lose that, right? So there's different layers to all of this. What do you tell someone, because I think about think about people in Buffalo. It's been generations we just talked about before. And all of a sudden they're 75 years old. They're using a computer, using a device. They have the same password they have for their account for where they buy their chicken wings versus where they bank at M&T Bank, right? Like, that's a problem. So what are we saying about that right now?
Yeah, it's hard. Call them boomers, call them blow folks, whatever. Like, just those that are uninitiated with tech, it's hard.
It's a real problem.
And these older folks are often targeted because they're the easiest to target.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's a really good answer here. Probably the easiest thing to say, well, don't use tech. And maybe that aligns with a handful of them. But banking on the internet, again, is like, just try to have different passwords, try to do multi-factor authentication. If there's a company that can solve this problem for the aging population, I think it'll be a killer success. It's an inordinate uphill battle for sure. Yeah, the email security with the uninitiated is the biggest problem. How do you sift through all the spam? One thing I think that Apple does pretty well is, like, if you buy an iPad, you can go to these little groups that they put together that you can go in and ask questions, and they might not have all the answers. Like, they don't know all the email providers.
Like a community, right? Yeah.
And so those kinds of things. And it's what ingratiates people to Apple. And it's why once people start using Apple devices, they continue, typically, especially the older population or just technologically uninitiated.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. One is people are creating their profile because they're saying they're on social media, they're using their password, they're using like their favorite, their Jim Kelly fan, right? That's in their password. And once they've done that, all of a sudden, that's out in the database. So the more personal information you give, the more your secret questions. So you have the 3 answers. What's your father's name? What school did you go to? All of a sudden, those are in there. So now they have a profile of you, of all this information. Maybe it's not of you, it's in some sort of database. And when they're run, right? So that's a real problem. So you kind of want to, and I'm trying to think of the book that I was reading recently. I think it was a former person who, this is what they used to do, former hacker. And they wrote a book about it and be like, here's the things not to do, or here's the things to do, right? That's a real problem of people just like, hey, this is what I like. And if I like this, well, there's probably Sabres 123 is my password, right? So
yeah, I mean, even like they say, like, don't reuse passwords. To even drive this further is to your security questions probably shouldn't be like correct answers to those security questions. I do this, and I've recommended people to do this for years, but we did a thing in undergrad where we were testing people, like just going up and asking them seemingly innocuous questions. Hey, what was the first kind of car you had? What was the make and model of the first car you had? What street did you grow up on? What's your mother's maiden name? Right? Like, and people answer these questions.
Right.
Like, and not realizing like, oh shit, they're answering these security questions. We've already have confirmation. And then we'd show them, hey, by the way, during this conversation, we got compromised your email. And so, or your access to whatever account. So I suggest using similar like types of passwords for security questions. Now, that's inordinately more friction to do that. But if you have a password manager, there are plenty of password managers that are free. But even those that aren't, I mean, you could use a keychain on Mac OS to maintain these things. And so it's a little bit more friction for peace of mind. We actually think we started talking about like omission bias in humans. And so the thought is that by doing nothing, inaction is less detrimental than taking action. And what we found, of course, empirically, that's not true, especially in cyber, but omission bias is really strong in humans. And the friction of not doing this, doing these kinds of things, just adding more friction, more steps to get to whatever the hell you're trying to get to, just tends to not happen.
Yeah. People don't want to do certain things. Like one of the businesses we have, a separate business, is an insurance brokerage. It's life insurance. No one wants to go through the process of buying life insurance like ever. I get it, right? It's terrible. Now, I'm not going to get into all the different ways that life insurance can be used. That's someone else's story to tell. But at the same time, people still need it, right? There's different reasons to have it. People, they don't want to deal with the alarm security on their house because it's kind of a pain, but they'll probably do it because they're protecting themselves, and that's something they could deal with. Cybersecurity, no one wants to go through the motions. They don't want to get a password protector. Like Keeper Security, LastPass, those are good ones. I've used them for years, right? Like those things can help a lot. But I think they talk about habits, like create frictionless habits. So if you go to the gym, like you read Atomic Habits, go to the gym that's on the way to your office, you're going to go to the gym more likely, right? Go for 5 minutes, build that habit. But the habit of updating your passwords, of cybersecurity, and this could be individuals, this could be a business. I think companies just say, I don't want to do that, right? No different than like a buy-sell agreement in life insurance. Like, I don't want to do that,
Yeah.
right? Like that's pain. I'm just going to move on to the next thing. That is an issue. So companies aren't doing it, right? Like bigger companies, like or medium-sized, small companies, all this kind of stuff. Like, what are you seeing out there? Like, and how worried should these companies be? Because I think it's getting more sophisticated on the other end. That means that the companies also have to get more sophisticated and think through this process. Because, I mean, if you lose it and you're held hostage, I don't know what else you can do besides pay them what they need to get paid, or right, if we're talking about a situation like that. But where I'm going with that, you see, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting that bad actors have to be more crafty in the things that they're doing, like writing better phishing emails. But at the end of the day, it's the same three initial access factors, and they're all mitigatable. We know how to mitigate them. The reason that people don't do it is because there's operational risk associated with mitigating cyber risk. And so you hear all this kind of advice. Well, put 2FA on everything. They're like, 2FA is a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And it helps, right? If it's phishing resistant and all these kinds of things. But for example, the last like 2 or 3 trips ago, 2 in a row, our marketing VP was requested to verify who they were while on an airplane. And it's like, I don't have Wi-Fi. I need to connect to Wi-Fi, but I can't connect to Wi-Fi until I have this password. And like, so it's like, this just kind of friction of 2FA is like, so then you lose 4 hours on a plane that you would otherwise have to do work, right? Like, so this is one small example, but you say, okay, well, and so Tract has 2FA on everything. And as a result, he didn't get those emails done. And so do we say, well, we should have just disabled 2FA for Jeff's email account, right?
Right.
Is that a reasonable request? The answer is hell no.
Right.
But because of that operational risk associated with mitigating cyber risk, sometimes you run into these friction scenarios. And so you get people like the security team say, well, just patch all your criticals or deploy firewalls and block everything and only allow the things that we need. And so then you say, well, what's the operational risk with doing that? Well, if you patch all the criticals and potentially not test them or whatever, like you're putting the people that are responsible for patching in a state where maybe things break and now they miss their daughter's soccer game or whatever, Tinder date or whatever. Or you deploy a new firewall and you block everything, you realize, oh, one of our mission critical things that allowed for us to generate revenue is now being blocked. And it's been blocked for whatever, a week, couldn't figure it out, and it's one. So there's the operational risk associated with cyber risk, mitigating cyber risk is something that, I've been trying to evangelize for a while now. And, I sound like a broken record, but it's like at best, the security team's just ignorant to the operational risk. And at worst, they just don't care. So we're trying to bridge that with Tract, but also just in general, if we can bring these two teams who are like largely seen as like a dichotomy in an enterprise, the security teams and the IT teams together to have more collaborative interaction, I think we'll be better off in general in the large enterprises.
Yeah, I had the same experience on a flight to Phoenix and I couldn't authenticate myself. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I'm doing something else now. Brought some books, whatever. Yeah. Like, what are you going to do?
Read a book, play some Angry Birds, whatever.
Yeah. So you have like, you've heard about this at banks, like the trust no one philosophy, and that falls in many different places. Like for Jeff, it's like, sorry, Jeff, like what were we going to do? Because even if Jeff's the best guy and probably is, there's someone else there and you just created some huge vulnerabilities.
It's not worth the risk, right? 4 hours on like send some emails, like doesn't matter. Like
it's not worth it.
Those emails aren't going to get out today. They'll get out tomorrow.
Yeah.
And look, if someone wasn't going to use our platform because we didn't get an email out within 15 minutes, like they weren't going to use it for real anyways. So
move on. Yeah. Yeah. When you say at worst, they just don't care, how often are you seeing like they just don't care type companies that are out there?
Rarely.
Okay.
Like just don't care about operational risk. Like what this comes down to is shitty CEOs, shitty CISOs, shitty executives that they're assholes. And when you have assholes at the top, it creates assholes at the bottom.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what it is. And so if you have a company of assholes, this is where you get like, I don't care. Just do your damn job and patch this shit. And then the response from IT is, do you have a ticket? What's the ticket number? What's its priority compared to all these other things I'm doing? Right. And so it's like just this constant like throwing shit back over the fence.
Yeah.
And it's why we have the problem that we have where on average it takes 215 days to patch new vulnerabilities that come out.
Yeah.
People are increasingly clicking links on bad emails or putting their passwords into forms that are obviously not Microsoft.com.
Right. you use the word assholes and you talk about at your company, the culture that you're building. It's like you have a no asshole philosophy. And sometimes, I don't know, have you been burned by that before? Like you just like, no, this guy's great. He comes on, you're like, no, he's a total asshole. He's got to get out of here. Like, what's that been like for you as you're building Tract?
We have no assholes at Tract.
Okay.
Like we don't have a careers page, but when we do, we'll have a big banner on there that says no assholes. And I'm committed to that.
Yeah.
Like I don't care if you're the best software developer, the best marketing person, the best salesperson. If you're an asshole and you get through and it becomes obvious that you're negatively impacting our environment, then you're out.
Yeah.
And the litmus for me being an asshole is my team still willing to like give me shit, make fun of me, tease or whatever? And as soon as they stop doing that noticeably, well, then I know, oh shit, I've become the asshole. And I got to figure out like, how do I become I'm the asshole?
Do those assholes that see the banner, do they know that? Oh, I can't apply there. I'm an asshole, right? Have you seen that?
Probably not, right? Like self-awareness is really hard.
Right.
When you smell bad, you don't smell yourself, that kind of thing, right?
Right.
I think that there have been a couple times in my career where, given feedback to people and some of them are like, oh shit, okay, my bad. Like, let me flip around.
Yeah.
And this happened to me once. I was the asshole. I didn't really care. And I was being terrible and got the feedback. And I was like, oh shit. Yeah, no, you're right. I am being an asshole, and made a conscious decision to identify identify them as they were coming up and switch. And a couple of weeks later, I got feedback from the leadership that said, hey, like we weren't expecting this transition. We were expecting to fire you because most people can't transition from being an asshole to not.
Right.
It takes a lot of conscious effort. And talk to anybody that knows me for more than couple of days, they'll know like I'm not a natural empath. So I have to work hard at being like not a robot, being good at being human. And so if you can have these conversations with people from a point of truly caring about them and assuming positive intent as opposed to assuming negative intent, I think that you have the opportunity to change people and to listen and that kind of thing. But some people just don't care.
Yeah.
Because they've been successful in the way that they have been. And there are plenty of companies that reward these kinds of toxic behaviors, especially in salespeople.
Oh yeah, for sure. How did you said you got feedback on it. So I guess like that was feedback, but then like, what are you doing to make that switch? Because like a lot of people can't change, but you can, right? Like if you, like you said, if you got to go to that dark place or work on it, whatever you're doing, like what were you doing to like overcome that? And what are you doing? I guess, because you talk about like, you have to work really hard at it. What are you doing to make sure that you're not that asshole?
Yeah, there's a handful of books that I read. My favorite one, probably the most impactful that I've ever read, is called Leadership and Self-Deception by the Arbinger Institute. It's a really quick read. It's like 400 pages. But the idea there is reinforced that like, if you're trying to change people from whatever your perspective is, likely you're looking at them as roadblocks or hurdles that you have to bulldoze to get what you want. When in reality, if you change your outlook, your behavior, your indication of the situation, you can probably identify something that's causing them to act a particular way. And it may not be direct, maybe indirect, and it's going to take time. And there's another book called Team of Teams by General McChrystal, which also really, really well written, very good, that essentially asserts that to exact a particular behavior out of others, you have to exert that behavior yourself. And it won't be immediate. It'll be over time. You have to build trust. Building trust is just an iteration of instances of a particular behavior. And so if you consistently exert or present that behavior, you'll build trust over time. But if you stop that even once, that impact negatively to the trust that you've built with one or more people is massive drop off. And so just trying to be cognizant of like, what have I done to enforce or create this situation and truly create the situation, right? Not just like, I look back and I'm not the cause at all. I didn't do anything. And in reality, there's probably some set of behaviors that you do exert or show off that are causing people to pull away. And being willing to like ask people, right? If you just say like, hey, what's the deal? I've been an asshole. Like, what can I do? And I have one-on-ones with everyone on the team. And I say, what am I doing that's causing issues? Like, what am I doing that I should stop doing? And if ever I get an answer for that thing, like take that to heart. Don't fluff it off. Don't come up with excuses. Don't be defensive. And all of this is really hard. It's much easier to say than do. And you're also putting people in a hard place. You're like, hey, this is my boss. Like, he pays my paycheck. Like, if I piss him off, like, he doesn't like something he's going to hear, like, was he going to fire me? Like, all this kind of shit. And so you really have to build this. You can't just jump into this thing and say, hey, tell me what I'm shitty at, without them trusting that you're going to take that and not have repercussions for it.
You're at the NSA. When you go from there and you come and you're building your own business, is there, with a lot of what you were just talking about, like, are you just like go all the time that you don't have time to think about any of these things or not? And I don't know what that experience would be like to be at the NSA versus like running your own business and what you're building today and being the boss, right? All that kind of stuff. Like, The culture difference.
Am I ignoring the people thing because of the business? Or
I don't know. No, I just like, that can go any way of like your experience, because it's very different to probably work at the NSA to what you're doing today. And that transition for someone like yourself to say, now I'm in charge. I don't know, like take that any direction you want.
Yeah, I mean, at the agency, I was really lucky. I actually was in two different groups that were hardcore mission driven. And so, like, typically you hear, oh, government's really slow, blah, blah, blah. That wasn't the case in the two orgs that I was in. We were mission focused 24/7, blah, blah, blah. And so now it's still probably slower than a startup world, but it just depends on what's going on in the world. And what I found, now I had fantastic leaders and examples of leaders at the NSA. My boss, and his boss covered my ass consistently over the 3 years I was there. And, they did give me the feedback during the way, like, hey, like leading teams of hundreds of people that don't actually report to me. It's a matrix thing. We're like pushing out these projects that were slated to take years, took months. And to galvanize a force, especially in government or military mindset where time in seat determines rank, both in the military, but also in the government. Like if you're a GS7 or a 9 telling a GS14 what to do, like who the hell are you to tell me what the fuck to do? And so if you can convince them to do things rather than tell them to do things, like prove to them that this is actually useful, well then, I mean, it's the reason why these projects, we had 3 projects that were slated to take 10 years in total, took 3 years in total. The reason we were successful is because we pitched people. We said, hey, this is going to tangibly improve your life. This is like all these kinds of things. And, when they said, well, that sounds stupid, and we walk them through, like it's an upfront tax that pays dividends in the future. And we have the same thing here at Tract. Team's only 10 of us. But if I have an assertion like we should be doing something, and Megan, who runs our engineering team, or Wendy, our product designer, says, like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, we shouldn't do that. And I say, okay, well, let me attempt to convince you why we should do that. But often I'm wrong. And, I've surrounded myself with people that are experts in the thing that they're well versed in. And so if Megan or Wendy or Aaron or any of these folks tell me, well, that doesn't quite make sense, my immediate reaction is, well, tell me why, so I can understand where you're coming from, because we hired you because you're a smart person and know shit that I don't know. So,
right. Yeah. Where is the team? Are you guys headquartered somewhere?
We're everywhere.
Everywhere. Okay. So it's remote.
Yes. We don't have any physical locations. Everyone's remote across the US. Yeah. We'll go as far west as Salt Lake City.
So they're working from home.
Yeah.
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 When was the company founded?
January of 2022.
22. Okay. So kind of, I guess that's kind of post-COVID a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like right towards the end. And there's so much conversation about work from home and all this stuff, right? What's your take on all that and all the stuff that you're hearing? And I guess it gets into your world through of cybersecurity as well, right? Because you have to, I know banks, like I work for a company, next thing you know, they get bought out by a bank and everything changed. Even if you work from home, like where do you leave your phone if you go to the bathroom? I'm like, who's coming in my room if I'm going to the bathroom, right? But like these are things that companies have to think about. This was pre-COVID, right? But the work from home world, like how do you see it? Obviously you see like it's got value, but because you're looking for talent no matter where they are.
Well, that's a big thing. Is like, if I could lead remote groups across the NSA in the most telecommunicationally restricted scenarios, then with all of the things I have available to me now, I should be even more successful. Fundamentally, what I found, like take money and real estate investments from large companies and all this kind of like things that are forcing people to tell their employees to return to work or return to the office. Outside of that, the real, I think, catalyst for forcing people to work is shitty managers. And I call them managers, not leaders. If the executives or the middle managers or whatever are incapable or unwilling to learn how to lead a team remotely, and there certainly is more tax. And I think that you always will get more out of people in person when you are in person. It's just the nature of the game. You can walk over to people, you can talk to them, whatever. The degree to which the gap is from like remote team, a product velocity versus in-person team, that's changeable. It's mutable. And it's based on the leadership's ability to and willingness to facilitate those interactions with people. And it is hard. It's way more difficult to build. But again, if you put in the effort in the beginning, down the line, it's just easier.
Yeah.
And so like this team is producing the highest feature velocity of any team I've ever worked with. Now, granted, like I didn't inherit anybody, right? Like everybody I hired was selected by me. And so we've worked with them before. They came as referrals. We know what their weaknesses are. We know what their strengths are. And that plays a really big part in it. As we start to scale, that will be limited in our ability, right? We don't know everybody. But if you can maintain this core of trust and openness and assuming positive intent, then I did this at Opaque, my previous company. We started to do it at Fortinet while I was there, and Fortinet's huge. We did it at the NSA, working with people that I'd never met in person. And so, yeah, if you can build relationships with people, true relationships with people, and prove to them that you actually care personally about them when you fuck up, inevitably, because everyone does, the tolerance for your fuck up is much higher than if you're constantly an asshole and they don't know who you are and you haven't demonstrated caring personally.
Are you seeing them face to face, like in person ever? Is it mostly like what we're doing now? Is it all of the above?
Yeah, so the company gets together twice a year right now in person. We fly them out to some city.
Right.
Like our end of year planning was in New Orleans this year. Most of the team had never been, and so that was where they chose. And for 2.5 days, we we plan, but really we just fuck off. We tell the team, like, we have a loose agenda, but at the end of the day, like, the only thing we can't do remotely is be in person. And it sounds cliche, but it's true.
Yeah.
And it's why when we come back, and even now, we had it early November given the schedules, and there's still inside jokes that came from that thing that you can't really get inside jokes as effectively and as many of these things remotely. It's just harder.
Yeah. No, for sure. How did you get in all this? Like, when did you know, like, I'm getting into this whole cybersecurity thing? Like, was this like something early on that you were doing with computers, or like, when did that take place?
It's because I'm lazy. And in high school, it was like, you take a pre-calc course or take this weird computer networking thing. And I was like, well, there's probably less math in this computer networking thing and less homework. So I chose that.
Yeah.
It was the Cisco CCNA boot camp thing for high schoolers. And I fell in love with that. I thought it was really cool. And probably as a millennial who likes instant gratification, like configuring a router and then seeing traffic go through this thing, I was like, oh shit, this is immediately useful. And so I was like, well, let me find some university that has a CCNA program, does network engineering, blah, blah, blah. That's how I ended up at Alfred. And they had an information assurance minor. And we participated in the Northeastern Collegiate Cyber Defense competition. And that was when I realized, like, oh shit, this is really cool. Like, not only is configuring a router interesting and enabling these packets, but doing it securely so that you truly understand what, like, letting traffic in and out and under, like, that whole kind of, it's a really complex problem that changes constantly. And so there's no one answer, like one thing fits all, even though there's underlying themes, but the way that you implement those things are different. And so that constant complexity just kind of grabbed me, and I've been running with it ever since.
Yeah. Seems like a lot of kids are going into college. They're studying computer science, engineering, all these different things. Do you see them going into cybersecurity when they're coming out of school? Are you finding these people? Like, what's the future hold? And on top of that, like, what would you say to someone who's fascinated, kind of like how you were, and maybe not sure like what general direction they go in, and like why cybersecurity? Like, to me, it seems like, man, this industry is just like, it's already taken off, and it's even going more. You obviously see that too as you lead a company into this time.
Yeah, I'm pretty biased here. I think these degrees in cybersecurity are bullshit. Now, let me walk back and say, like, I've hired people that have no degrees and they've been the best. And I've interviewed people with PhDs or CCIEs, which is a high level networking certificate. And they're like, they know shit, and vice versa, right? So, like, for me, certificates, undergrad, formal education, like, you should use those if that's your learning style. Understand what your learning style is. And if you can learn on your own, then, especially in this field, do that, because you don't need to go to school to be successful in this space. One of my best friends runs operations at Fortinet after our acquisition, but there are a few people more knowledgeable than him in some of these spaces, and he has no degree, and he's wildly successful. So, and obviously he's not the only one. But my suggestion for those that want to get into cybersecurity is, it's similar to the medical industry. Like, to be good at cyber, you have to have some understanding fundamentally of the systems, right? We'll just call them the systems. And so you can't be a brain surgeon or an orthopedic surgeon without first becoming a surgeon, right? Going through med school, doing your residency, realizing, oh shit, I want to go do this very specific thing. And so then doing a cardio residency, right? And becoming a surgeon that way. So cyber is the same way. Like, if you truly want to understand hacking and fundamentally how things work, like, you have to be a protocol expert. You have to understand how does TCP/IP work, and the best way to do that is be a computer scientist, understand how C, C++, Rust, Go, whatever, learn a language and really learn a language, or understand how systems work. Be a system admin, go to AWS and get these cloud certs and understand how Linux subsystems work, or go the networking route. right? Understand fundamentally how packets get switched, get routed, how these kinds of things work. And those are the three best ways to get into the cyber field, because all three of these are different groups in cybersecurity. And if you look at all the major, the successful cybersecurity folks, they came out of the networking world back in the 70s and 80s because that's all there was. Like, network security is the largest market in the world for security, followed by the endpoint security market. But bad guys or bad actors like popping networks because networks see everything and they're very often poorly patched or poorly secured. Every firewall in the world gets these SSL vulnerabilities popped because people put their portal on the web, their management interfaces on the web, and they get hit. So, people like to shit on the vendors, but really it's the operators that make these things accessible to the internet.
They create their own problem. Tracked, who's it for? Who's paying attention to it? Who are you working with?
Yeah, so at the end of last month, we hit a threshold. We have over 100 companies on the platform now, and we've only been in market for about 8 months. But the premise of our company is that people don't patch because they're afraid it's going to break their shit. And so we tell you how patches have broken other people's shit before you apply it to yours. So we do vulnerability scanning, we do patch deployment, we collect telemetry on how those patches affect people, anonymize it, and share with everybody else in real time. So we have small, how they're called, nonprofits, law enforcement, fire departments, all the way up to multi-billion-dollar market cap companies on our platform that use the platform because we're the only one in the world answering the only question that anyone cares about when it comes to patching, and that's, will this break my shit? And so we had a lot of really good feedback from users. And the great thing about our platform right now is that it's entirely free. We'll have a premium version of the product go live in Q1 of next year, but it will always be free on Track to find and fix your vulnerabilities across all of your operating systems. And so what's really cool there is that we're not just building for Fortune 2000s that can pay us, multi-million-dollar or multi-$100,000 contracts a year. If you're a small fire department or nonprofit, it's an enterprise product. There's no difference. There's not product A and product B. It's the same product with different feature flags. And so I've been a big fanboy of Cloudflare since Michelle and Matt started it up, and have been a customer of theirs for that same amount of time. And we're taking a lot of feathers out of their cap, copying their go-to-market and all that kind of stuff. If you can prove to the tinkerers that your product is real, it works, and it's useful, they'll recommend it to their enterprise.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. So where do we learn? Obviously, track.com.
Yep.
Spell it. Where do they connect with you? Where do they learn more about it?
Yeah, so track.com, it's trackd.com. And people ask all the time, how's it pronounced? It depends on if you're a Unix nerd or not. TrackD is what a lot of the Unix nerds call it. Tracked is non-Unix nerds. But yeah, Mike at track.com, LinkedIn, not really a Twitter or X or whatever the hell guy. Social media is not really my thing, but Mike at track.com, shoot me an email. If you go to track.com, there's an AMA. Doesn't require an email if you don't want to give it to us. So you can reach out to us without getting spammed. And, we don't have any salespeople. And, we tell people this all the time. If you tell us to F off, we'll F off. We're not going to spam your inbox.
Yeah.
No one likes an annoying vendor.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, man, I think when you're looking at these types of things that are just critical to your business, to yourself, to just your peace of mind, you want people that cut through the bullshit and get to the point and can teach it to you. And that's what you do. That's what your company does. So I appreciate it, man. I appreciate your time coming on this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
From Buffalo. So go Bills, I guess, all that good stuff. And yeah, man. Enjoyed it, Mike. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much. It was great. Cheers.
In case you haven't noticed, we love podcasts. In fact, we love building podcasts, everything from development to production. Because of all that, we're building a one-of-a-kind podcast network. If you have a podcast or looking to launch a new podcast, then we should talk. You can message me on Twitter at Eric_Kaz or hit us up any way that works for you. Let's talk about your podcast joining this one-of-a-kind podcast network.